Welcome to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor. I'm really pleased to have with me for the first time Tom Eldridge. He's the Director of Business Development for HydroGraph Clean Power. Before I say hello to Tom, just a couple of remarks here. On October 22nd, Kjirstin Breure, the company's CEO, who you've met many times on this show, she put out a shareholders letter that really pretty much, I think, laid out where the company is now and where it hopes to be a year from now. For example, not expecting any kind of significant revenue this year, but probably in 2026 we should start to see some significant agreements and contracts with various companies. And the company expects to build out to a capacity of 350 tons per year, she told us recently, and in her letter. Well, the stock has risen. Obviously, people are pretty excited about it. It's reached a market capitalization in Canadian dollars of over $1 billion. And I think that's on the belief that there's going to be a lot of demand for this company's pristine graphene, which is really the only one like it in the world that can be at least produced on a commercial scale. And it's also the economics, which we've talked about frequently in the past, look very, very promising. Relatively low capital costs, the ability to gear up and to expand production without any apparent limit at this stage. So there's lots of reasons to be optimistic, and a lot of reasons why I'm very excited about the stock for sure. So we're hopeful that Tom can help us give us a little more color, a little bit more understanding about the challenges and the opportunities that are for this really exciting company. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jay. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, it's great to have you. British accent and all. We Americans are quite enamored by the British accent. So,
well, glad to hear, because I'm stuck with it. So.
You're stuck with it. Well, what we'll be more enamored about is what you have to tell us about HydroGraph, I'm sure. So, so you've had a lot of experience in the past. I mean, you have a pretty strong technical background, I guess, and you've also been involved in nanomaterials in the past. Is that you decided to go to work for HydroGraph? What caused you to be interested in working for HydroGraph? And then maybe you can help us understand the connection between your past and how that relates to your approach to business right now with HydroGraph.
Sure. So, yeah, I've been working in the industry for graphene and carbon nanomaterials now for 12 years. Mm-hmm. And I was really drawn to the opportunity to join HydroGraph and become part of the team, in no small part down to the really exciting technology that we have. So I think in all of the years I've been working with graphene and various different graphene materials, clearly the production process is really highly differentiated. So you'll probably know yourself, Jay, the way most companies have gone about producing graphene to date has usually been to take graphite as the starting feedstock material, and to basically convert it into graphene by trying to what's called exfoliate it, or break it apart, in other words. So applying lots of energy and really trying to go from a three-dimensional material down to a two-dimensional material,
right?
Or in other words, atomically thin structure that graphene has, which is what gives it its amazing properties. But these processes, I've kind of seen over the years that companies have tended to struggle to really leverage graphene technology, and I think it comes down to two main things. But in essence, what you'll hear from companies is, maybe they tried graphene like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and they either couldn't get it to work, or they maybe got some improvement, but the amount of graphene they had to put into their system was such that the cost impact was too high. And so, in other words, they couldn't really find a sufficient value proposition. And as I say, I think that comes down to two main factors, one of which is you need to have really good quality graphene, frankly, and has to be really consistent as well. And the other aspect is, which is often overlooked, is you need to have a lot of know-how. You really need to know what you're doing in terms of applying graphene, actually working with it to integrate it into other materials. So on the first side of things, on the quality issue, and I'm sure Kjirstin's probably talked about this at length in other interviews, but essentially, because of this approach that most companies have taken to get graphene from graphite.
Mm-hmm.
These approaches, and there's various different techniques, they will pretty much boil down to trying to achieve the same thing. You have mechanical exfoliation techniques, you have chemical exfoliation, you have electrochemical exfoliation techniques. And as I say, basically applying lots of energy, trying to break them apart.
Mm-hmm.
But these are very imprecise and cumbersome methods. It's really hard to get good process control.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really three main issues with these approaches. Firstly, getting to actual two-dimensional material is really challenging,
and do it consistently, right? And do it consistently.
And yeah, because graphene has its properties when it's in that two-dimensional regime, and according to like the ISO definition of what graphene is, between 1 to 10 layers, it has these unique properties. Beyond 10 layers, it's basically indistinguishable from graphite. And the Advanced Material Journal published an article where they had analyzed 60 different products on the market, and they basically found that most of them contain less than 10% graphene by this measure, and none of them contain more than 50%. So that's really one of the main struggles, and this is why you see, you have to generally chuck in quite a lot of quote unquote graphene, or what's really mostly nano graphite, before you start to see the improvements, and then by that point it's cost prohibitive. And then the second issue is really one about process control and consistency, like you said. So you tend to get really wide variation in particle size with these approaches, both lateral dimensions and thickness, and it's within batches as well as between batches. So it makes it really difficult if you're producing a product and you're looking at incorporating graphene into it. You can't have variability, because it means you're going to end up with yield losses. I mean, and especially if you're working in like medical or aerospace, there's no way you can have a product that comes out of your production process that can be vastly different to previous batches. And that comes down to the graphene that you're using and the inconsistency with it. And then the third common issue that I've typically seen over the years is with the impurity levels that you get from these kind of exfoliation techniques. And because of the high energy, you're normally oxidizing the edges of the graphene. And some kind of impurities and defects can be beneficial for some applications, but really that needs to be well controlled. You need to be able to kind of switch that on and off. It shouldn't just be like a byproduct of the process. So this oxidation tends to provide several percentage atomic weight levels of oxygen content. And then depending on the specific approach, for example, if it's ball milling and then you end up with metallic impurities, if it's like a liquid phase exfoliation technique, you could end up with some residual surfactant chemistry. And if you're using like a electrochemical exfoliation, you may have intercalated ions residing in the product as well. So all of these different techniques have their own different challenges with impurities. And when I saw the data sheets from HydroGraph, and when I was talking to Kjirstin for the first time, I'm kind of really blown away by the ultra high purity, because it's something that wasn't really there in the market before, and still isn't since. And I've been with the company for a year now. And the fact that the particle size as well was so uniform, both within batches and then identical batch to batch, it just really addresses like a huge issue with quality. And then the fact that I found out in those conversations that production has been done in the US, but Kjirstin made the decision to set up the applications lab in Manchester. It's like Graphene City. Is really encouraging, because, as I say, it's the second part of the equation for what's really critical to be able to successfully get the most out of graphene in applications is that know-how, how to process it, how to work with it downstream. And the Graphene Engineering Innovation Center is just full of expertise, full of equipment, and it's the right kind of place for us to be able to prove out how it performs in applications. So yeah, kind of long-winded way of explaining kind of what really impressed me. But that's really what it came down to. And then a fantastic team as well. All really capable people. super passionate and really enthusiastic about what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's very, very easy to get on with everyone there. So yeah, I've absolutely loved it so far. It's been a really good
How long have you been
journey.
there, Tom?
So a year, yeah, it's
1 year?
it's been a
Just
year
one
now.
year. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had to have this perfect graphene, this homogeneous material that wasn't going to vary without variation, um, in order to really get the downstream things to work, I guess, probably efficiently. Many of them anyway, right? In other words, you needed this perfect material. That's what attracted you to it. You saw the data and you realized that it didn't have the flaws that some of these other so-called graphenes had. And so now that, what does that mean? That means that you can do all kinds of things with it that you couldn't do if you had an imperfect product.
Right, correct. And the sort of proof in the pudding is in the eating, as I say. So you can have a product with amazing specifications, but ultimately that's not really what will excite the customers, and half the time maybe they might not know what that means, or might not be able to translate it very easily to their needs.
Mm-hmm.
But once we started putting the material into applications, and then when I started seeing the data that was being generated from the UK lab, that's when it got really exciting, because what we've been seeing is, with the fractal graphene, we're basically able to, and it's across different applications, but we're basically able to put in really quite low concentrations for it to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
So in most cases, we're generally seeing loading levels that are about 10 times lower, and even in some cases 100 times lower,
right,
than what you would typically see with the kind of conventional graphene nanoplatelets.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately we've got like this 10x advantage in terms of how much actually needs to go in to get the same or better performance improvement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's already like a
Big advantage.
a huge advantage. Yeah, absolutely. But you can't kind of like overstate how all those things are great, but ultimately, and HydroGraph has made like huge waves recently, but ultimately we're still a startup, and so we still have to kind of remember the sort of rules of a startup, and especially a new market. I think sometimes people can get excited about graphene and immediately think of it as like a commodity because it's a material.
Yeah.
So if you just solve the production issues, if you just solve the quality issues and consistency, well then the sales start rolling in, which doesn't quite work like that, because you have to kind of establish a market, you have to create the market, create demand.
Yeah.
And so any new technology from any startup basically has to find its role. There has to be a job that it fulfills for the customer better than any alternative. That's just that. I mean, this is basically kind of establishing product market fit, in other words. And so we're on that journey, working away on this, and getting this kind of technical validation testing done both internally in our lab, but also now with customers, which is really exciting. So we can start to see the kind of real benefits that we get from our material, but in the wild, as it were, like in the field with customers in their plant as well. So being able to replicate these kind of successful performance improvements.
Yeah, so it's not just, it's not a commodity really. It is a commodity, but it's also a high tech story, really. We're talking about technical, I'm almost endless possibilities, but it takes a lot of work. And then once you think you have something that works, you've got to test it with these companies. I guess you're probably working with your future clients, your current clients, actually. Can you give us some examples of maybe a process or one application or so where from the lab to the verge of commercialization? Can you give an example or two of how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I can start off explaining maybe the typical journey and the sort of sales process that we follow, and then give you some specific examples of the kind of performance that we've been getting in some of these customer programs. So, I mean, normally, we'll start off where, either we do some outbound outreach, or, very often we get customers coming to us with some interest. And, especially if they've come to us, they'll typically have some kind of problem that they're trying to solve or address. And it might be that there's, some sort of internal challenge. Maybe they have like a process inefficiency, which is causing them some cost that they want to eliminate, or it might be they're looking to try to capture an external opportunity. Maybe there's like a new market they want to go into, or they have one of their customers has given them a new specification that they can't achieve with the existing materials that they're using. So this is driving some innovation program that they're working on. Or it could be that there's an external threat, right? There could be a competitor of theirs that's developed like a new improved version of a product, and they want to catch up with that or overtake them. And so again, it's spurring and initiating this kind of materials innovation where they're looking at different options that are available. And we'll typically look at doing a kind of discovery meeting with them where we really try and understand like what are their requirements, what do they really want to try to achieve here, and what are their options, because everyone's option is always to do nothing, just to stick with the status quo. There could be other materials besides graphene. Maybe graphene isn't the right thing for them, but more often than not, they've perhaps done their homework and they've done some research and they've looked at graphene technology. They may have looked at HydroGraph specifically, and they see the enormous promise of it. So we'll look at kind of understanding, is there a good sort of problem solution fit? Do we have some prior existing data on this that supports the belief that could be the case? And then we'll look at organizing and planning a project together. So once we've identified, okay, there's a real opportunity here, and there's a specific product they're looking to try to develop, and there's a specific timeline in place where they're looking at having this done, and we know that there's a budget and so on. We know what they might be able to give us a volume forecast estimate and so on. So it's a real opportunity, and we can add that to the pipeline. And then we'll look at planning the project together. So there may be an initial technology validation stage, I would say, where they're really they might have one or two kind of really key performance indicators they're trying to improve. It might be a specific strength improvement, or a kind of lightweighting improvement, or conductivity improvement. And if they can get that, then that's kind of they maybe stage gate it, and that will allow them to move on to the next step, where they can then do a full kind of qualification process, which may take many more months to do. And then ultimately at that point, when it comes to finally qualifying and validating the technology, then you start looking at, okay, well, how do we plan getting this into production with them, and looking at supply agreements and everything like this. So in those early stages, kind of have to look at whether or not, if we're going to support the customer, how do we do that? Right. Do we just provide them with sample material? Do we give them the graphene powder to work with, or do we provide them with more of a kind of downstream version, or customized version, or do we go even further and do a lot of testing and technical support alongside that? And sometimes it's a balance between those, depending on where the customer is. So we want to try to kind of meet them where they are.
Sure.
And a lot of the time, to de-risk the project, it's usually a good idea to try to provide the customer with a ready-to-use version. So some kind of more downstream format. Could be a dispersion, could be master batch or compound or something like this, in the carrier that the customer is used to working with. And that way we just kind of eliminate the variable of the customer processing it. We sort of take that out of their hands, and that kind of eliminates any guesswork from our side, because otherwise sometimes we can just be leaving it up to chance if we do that.
My goodness.
So, and some customers have loads of experience working with graphene and other carbon nanomaterials, and we can be more confident that they can process the material successfully. So it really just depends where the customer is in their capabilities. And then sometimes, depending on the complexity of the project, we look to charge if we're doing, say, a little bit more kind of engineering. So if we really have to customize and make sample material and do some testing for them, we'll typically look to charge for that kind of thing.
Of course. Yeah.
And then if we're seeing good results on the initial validation side of things, we'll look at doing like letter of intent, trying to get some commitment from the customer as to, this is the where this is basically what we're all kind of working towards, and this is what we're all kind of hoping to achieve. So we're all aligned and on the same page. And then we go through to support them as much as we can. Once we know who's doing what by when, and how that project is going to be sort of shared and divided. So that's kind of the process that we follow in a.
Wow, it's extremely complex and labor intensive at your end of the. I mean, to start out, I guess you are the point man for a lot of this. Then you and other people, other scientists at the Geek. I mean, it's quite complex. I think anybody that wonders why HydroGraph isn't earning big bucks right now might start to understand a little bit of the complexity that goes into these. It's a lot of work. Now, you must have some other people that are helping you with this. I mean, that you are the business development guy.
That's right. Yeah. So
you have to have a pretty strong science background. You have to understand what you're talking about, obviously, with the.
Yeah. I know enough to be dangerous. So yeah, you definitely have to kind of have one foot in each camp in both worlds, because you need to be able to translate the technical stuff effectively between. I mean, obviously we involve our application scientists in customer projects, but in the initial kind of qualification stages, then you have to kind of make those decisions pretty quickly and by ourselves. But yeah, we do have a team. So there's myself. We also have a team member who covers North America, and we also have a team member covering Asia Pacific as well, in the business development. And we have a marketing resource, and we also have the application scientists who are really providing a lot of the technical support for the customer projects.
So I guess once you have these questions answered and you've found a fit, something that really works well, then if you have really major size customers, it can start to be a very profitable business. But there's a lot of cost and energy that goes into the front end of this. All of these.
And I think this is why it's extremely important to try to be very selective. So we have to really try and qualify opportunities as best as we can. And it's that balance between the commercial potential, but also that technology fit as well. I think it's one of the big challenges with graphene in particular is that this is a kind of double-edged sword. It's such an amazing material. It has all of these superlative properties, and that means it can go into all different application areas. But there's no way that as a young company that you can go after all of those at once. And that's kind of, I think, one of the kind of areas where other companies have maybe struggled with, is kind of making that decision. And sometimes it might not be the right decision, but you have to kind of make that decision, and then fail fast if that one's wrong, but not trying to go after everything at once, and this is why we have a roadmap where we look at which are the different applications and market segments that we're going to tackle after each other. So that allows us to be a little bit more disciplined with things, with which opportunities we try to take on board. And then when we can be more confident in the successful outcome of those, because as you say, once you get even just a few of those on board, then you kind of go from like 0 to 100 kind of thing. So so that's particularly exciting. But advanced materials is hard. It's it's very, very different to say, like, software industry where you've got like low marginal costs. You can it's not as capital intensive as manufacturing. And you can kind of scale things really quickly. But so advanced materials, it is kind of more of a patient game, but at the same time, it's a really fundamental technology. I mean, this is like the bedrock of all other technologies. They kind of all rely on materials essentially. So that's why I find it most exciting.
You were talking about one of the remarks you made a little while ago was that it takes such a small amount of this material
Hmm.
to get the results you're looking for, and you're getting consistent results because you have consistent material. And so, I mean, one of the questions I had for you was about price, and I suppose that I don't know if you even get to that point. Maybe that's up the corporate ladder somewhere in terms of how they price. But I'm sure there's some discussion when you're at least at advanced stages after you've worked out the science and now you're ready to go, and there's a price per ton or whatever the measurement is. So I'm gathering that price is probably not the biggest issue. If you have a very small amount of material, then, I mean, because we're looking at the economics of $250,000 a ton up to
Hmm.
$800,000, $900,000 a ton or so. Well, if you're using a very small amount, it's not going to matter to the customer, and especially if they're getting huge benefits from it, one way or the other, commercial benefits. Do I have that right? So pricing isn't, I mean, because a lot of people say, what are you talking about? 800, $250,000. That sounds like a very high price, but when you look at the small amount that's required, not so much.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because it's something that yeah, people, it's hard to get your head around, because because of the concentration levels are so small that, yeah, when you look at the dollar price per ton or per kilo, it's easy to sort of fall off your chair if you're used to kind of commodity prices. But exactly as you say, the fact that we're able to put in such low concentrations. I mean, with some of these plastic applications, we're talking about 0.01% to 0.1%. And
Mhm.
previously, a lot of the way that kind of graphene has sort of hung its hat on being a kind of multifunctional material, and it definitely is. But I think that's kind of the way the positioning has had to go for a lot of applications, where it's been kind of um, you know uh, uh, limited to some of these sort of high value niche applications, where it can only really justify its cost impact by having these kind of multifunctional benefits. But what we're seeing with our material is that we can now really address head on um, direct challenges that the industry has across like really mainstream markets, basically, which is the really exciting thing. So in a lot of these plastic applications and coatings and composites as well, yeah, we're seeing these low loading levels. And so mostly what we're seeing is customers really looking to see, can you make my product stronger, lighter, thinner, more durable, so it lasts longer? And
Mhm.
then that way I also have I'm using less material, so my material costs are going down.
Uh-huh.
I have a lower equivalent CO2 when I produce my products now.
Mhm.
So I have a sustainability benefit. And that's a huge theme at the moment, especially in like packaging and in automotive, and across loads of other different sectors.
Mhm.
This kind of resource efficiency, which is one of the big promises of nanotechnology in general,
Mhm.
but you really see it sweeping across a lot of markets at the moment, and we're able to tap into that because we can demonstrate with the kind of improvements we get in the mechanicals with these low concentrations. And you put in those kind of loading levels of our fractal graphene, the customer will be able to lightweight the product, so they can reduce their material cost. They
Mhm.
can reduce their transportation costs because the
Mhm.
components are now
Right.
lighter. They can also, because they're using less material in the production process, they can reduce their cycle time or the energy
Mhm.
that's going into it as well. So with all of those benefits put together, the material quite easily can pay for itself, which has just not been possible before with
Yeah.
graphene in these markets.
Interesting. Yeah.
So exactly as you say, this kind of really opens up like a lot of possibility where it is a kind of would have been a struggle for the sort of more conventional graphene nanoplatelet
Graphene.
products that
Yeah.
have been in the market before, where you have to chuck in at least 10x more material to get the same kind of performance benefit.
You mentioned coatings and composites.
Hmm.
Those are, it's my understanding they might be a couple of the first applications, early applications, potentially very large scale users. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, and it's because they're all kind of related, because they're all polymer based, and with our particular material, we see, because of the small particle size and because of the super high purity,
Mm-hmm.
this is why we're able to use such low concentrations, and it generally disperses quite easily. We can deaggregate the fractal graphene aggregate, and yeah, in all polymer systems, we're generally finding these low concentrations. We're able to improve strength, stiffness, and even toughness, impact strength. Sometimes all of these properties together at the same time, which is quite remarkable.
Incredible.
Because
Yeah.
a lot of the time with polymers, you get there'll be a bit of a trade-off. You maybe with an additive you can get some benefit, but you reduce the other.
There's something else.
And and that's can be true of graphene as well. It depends on like what kind of concentrations you put in and what polymer you're working with. But generally, the fact that we see multiple mechanical property improvements together is usually sufficient for the customer. And yeah, I mean, we've seen for instance, one customer trial where they've achieved a 30% lightweighting in a plastic component. We've seen another customer trial where for anti-corrosive coatings, the coatings have lasted twice as long in salt spray testing than the original formulation. We've seen in some film applications, plastic films, conductive films. We've gone from we've increased the conductivity 5 times from what it was before, using conventional conductive fillers. And then in the energy storage stuff as well, which is one of the soon after markets after the kind of plastics, coatings, and composites.
You see that as the second potentially batteries and energy storage, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really where we've got the example there where we've had a customer incorporating a small amount of fractal graphene. They've increased the capacitance of their energy storage device 4 times. So the performance that we're getting, and the exciting thing is this is all done from the customer. These tests are all at the customer side. So this is not just us saying, okay, we've done this in the lab, and here's our data. Even though that in itself is credible, because a lot of the testing we do is in collaborative projects with Manchester University at the Graphene Engineering Innovation Centre.
Yes,
but there's nothing better than having the customer do that validation testing, and to see them doing it. We've had customers that have been investigating graphene for since like 2012, 2013, and they've said to us, like, we've tried dozens of different products, we've never really quite gotten it to work, and like now we're seeing like real improvements here with the HydroGraph stuff. So that's what I love to hear.
Well, I guess that's why you're a happy camper now where you are. See that kind of success, it must be. But I have a better understanding now, I think, of the amount of work that's involved at the front end of these relationships with these companies. It's very intense and lots of work. And so you are sort of ferreting out or prioritizing the different industries based on, obviously, the company or a startup, and you have to be conscious, as you said, of the costs and so forth. So you're looking for, I guess, for those larger scale potential clients. And I mean, and once you have it figured out, it's just like a template, right? It keeps going, and the revenues keep coming in at some point. What do you? So the company has a 350. Kjirstin is saying a 350 ton per year capacity sort of plan for the end of 2026. Do you think there will be from composites or whatever, the business to sort of get up to that level? I mean, I'm sure that the company is planning that level based on what it sees in the pipeline, right?
Yeah, with certainly with some of the programs we're working on that we have in the pipeline, then yeah, I mean that's why we've planned for this expansion in production, so it aligns with what we're looking to achieve on the commercial side. Right.
One thing us investors, we like to see, who are these companies that you're working with, and household name companies. If we could hear that it's a Tesla, or it's a General Motors, or it's a it's some big name company, household name company, wow, that would be really exciting. But obviously you have non-disclosure agreements in most cases, I think. I mean, I've heard a few names. I mean, there's a medical application, I think. This involves very small amounts of graphene, I believe. But is it just a matter of competition, that these companies just don't want their competitors to know? Is that mainly why the non-disclosure agreements are?
Yeah, that is basically it. That's the main reason. So yeah, because they see this as a big competitive advantage. So yeah, they want to be very cautious about what they disclose, and yeah, who they're working with to get their material and so on. So yeah, it's a fine line, because yeah, obviously we would love to be able to make announcements about that with our partners
Sure.
and our customers. But at the same time, we want to keep the customers happy and respect those wishes as well. So, but yeah, wherever it's possible to do so, we obviously try to announce these as well. There's probably likely some, maybe smaller scale and sort of medium-sized customers that we're working on, like customer case studies with. So yeah, we can expect to see some of those start to be released as well, which I think just that kind of lends a lot of credibility and weight, even so, because it's again another kind of proof point that someone else is saying, look, the technology is working really well for their application, and it's the best thing since sliced bread, etc. And they've looked at other options, and this is what they've gone with.
So you have this, obviously, this major relationship with the geek that you personally work with probably closer than anyone else at HydroGraph, I guess. Is that fair to say?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I do work with them closely, but it's really our application scientists that are there every single day. So I'm frequently visiting there. I was there yesterday. But yeah, generally work closely with their teams, their commercial teams, and also their technical teams. But yeah, day to day, it's our application scientist team. But it's a very important partnership for us, because, as I said right at the beginning, knowing what you're doing and how you're actually applying the graphene is just as important as having really good quality material.
Oh, for sure.
Without that know-how, then you've got a lump of black fluffy powder. You don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, which I guess Dr. Sorensen thought is what he had when he first saw it, right?
Right.
So he looked at it under the microscope and started understanding its structure and so forth. So
it's a great story. Have you spoken with him, by the way? It would be a great guest.
He's what? He'd be a great.
Have you chatted with Chris? He'd be a great guest.
Not yet. Maybe I shall do so. A good friend of mine who's now on the board of directors is Kerry Landis, and I've spoken with him, and it's so how about other partnerships, though? I mean, I think you mentioned the companies start to do their own work, and then you get the feedback from them at some point. But are there other sort of partnerships besides the geek that you're involved with that could you talk about that, if that's the case?
Yes, I think that there's other academic partnerships that we're looking at. But I think on the industrial side, probably the biggest initiative that we've kicked off recently has been the compounding partner program. So we're essentially, on the plastic side of things, we have access to be able to do extrusion at the Graphene Engineering Innovation Center on a lab scale. So we can support customers by sampling them with master batch and compounds and so on. They can then do melt processing with and produce components and test the graphene technology in their application. But ultimately, at industrial scale, what we want to be able to do is create a network of preferred compounders that we can essentially signpost customers to and say, we want to get really high quality compounds and master batch containing HydroGraph's fractal graphene. These are the companies that are basically approved. And we do that by a sort of vetting and screening process, which involves actually a kind of a light audit where we actually go to visit the factories, and then we have a qualification test program where essentially what we're looking to do is try to replicate the quality of dispersion that we get in the Geek Lab with what the compounders can do in their plant. And so it's a kind of round robin testing where we're measuring parts that they make. They measure them in their lab and provide us a report, and then we measure those parts in our lab and give them a report. And this is all done on the same polymer, same graphene, same loading level, 11 compounders that we've been engaging with in this program. So we're pretty close to start announcing some, and we encouraging and welcoming more partners to join that as well.
Wow.
And it does a few things. So it gives us additional market access, because the compounders that we work with, they have their own customers, and then we get our graphene into their projects and their customer programs. It gives us additional technical capability by working with them on collaborative projects. They may have some lab equipment and lab scale testing that they can do as well to support our efforts. And it can be done, collaboratively, obviously. And it gives our downstream customers, so, whether these are packaging companies, automotive companies, whoever we're working with, it gives them supply availability and that kind of quality assurance that they can get a reliable supply of this stuff at industrial scale. Same kind of quality we can do in our lab, but in kind of many tons of plastic product.
Sure. So it starts in the lab. You guys are involved with it perhaps in the early stages in the lab, and then the partners. So you might have some announcements, you think, fairly soon. Some of these new partnership announcements. Wow, that's exciting. Okay. We haven't talked about the military yet. I'm guessing that it's my understanding that there is definitely the U.S. Armed Services anyway, some of the branches of the military involved. I would gather maybe the UK as well as NATO. Is there anything you can tell us about that? I mean, I know that a lot of that is just very confidential and can't be talked about, but
yeah, I mean, the regions you mentioned, we have a lot of interest from defense, and we do have some specific opportunities in defense as well in the pipeline that we're working on, that are particularly exciting. But yeah, as you say, not too much I can say about it at the moment. But
I'm wondering, you've got the composites and some of those large scale markets that you perceive. Defense might say, well, wait a minute, we're most important. Maybe you should just pay attention to us. I'm just wondering. I mean, to what extent does defense take priority? I don't know if it's
and it's a great question. And it has to be a kind of balancing act as well, and like what applications are perceived as being defense related, and what other kind of segments are seen to be separate from that. But there are plenty of different applications that we can strike a balance there. But it's an important thing for us to consider, because especially as we move and develop these relationships in the defense industry more and more. But the great thing about the defense though is it does provide there's longevity to these kind of contracts.
One question that I had was, so in the early stages, to balance the risk, or to the balance the risk reward for you and the customer, I guess, I don't know if you can, again, perhaps you've commented on that a bit, but you have, you start out with somebody that's, a brand new customer, and you went through that, the whole thing of, you have to spend a certain amount of time, or you have to just determine early on whether or not this is someone you can afford to spend time with, right? And then from your perspective, and then, if it seems like it's something that makes sense for you, you'll go forward with it. I guess that's one aspect of balancing the risk, is just making sure you're not spinning your wheels on something that's not going to bring any revenues to the company.
Exactly. And I think there's kind of two tiers of looking at that. So one is on the specific opportunity, where we can make a determination on that pretty easily by qualifying, asking the right kind of questions about the opportunity, the timeframes behind it, what's the kind of potential volumes that are involved in this if we're successful, understanding the kind of commercials on it, like is the loading level and the potential cost impact going to be acceptable for that particular customer. So you can look at it on a specific customer level and specific opportunity level, but then also kind of look at it more generally at a sort of higher and strategic level, where we kind of look at, is this a good fit for us in terms of our roadmap and what we're really trying to prioritize. And one of the first things that I did when I joined was do a market prioritization analysis. So working closely with the application scientist team, basically looking at, where do we think we're closest to product market fit in terms of, what do customers want basically, and can we build it? So where do we see the biggest kind of pull from the industry for solutions? How urgent are they? How underserved are they? All these kind of things to see, could this be really competitive for us? And then, how far along are we in the technology readiness level on the application side to be thinking that we've got a good solution fit here, basically, in other words. And so, that's really where the polymer stuff came from, because it shows us that, we're very close there, essentially, to being able to demonstrate that. And then there's, lots of different kind of subgenres and categories in those markets. But broadly speaking, seeing the same kind of requests and requirements from customers, as I mentioned before, like lightweighting and down gauging being one of the predominant ones. And then second to that would be conductivity requirements as well.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Just another question or two yet, Tom, if you would, patiently. You've been spending a lot of time with us, and I know your time is very valuable. I am a shareholder, and I care about that too. So recently, HydroGraph announced a new patent for actuator technology. What do you do with something like that when the company comes out with a new patent? And I understand there's a pipeline of patents coming. So what do you do with that information and that new technology?
Yeah, and the patents are really important. I mean, the whole IP strategy and making sure that we can protect the business with all of the technologies that we're developing, and that we've got all of these coming in the pipeline, that gives us that the sort of future items to look at in the roadmap. With something like the actuators, I mean, this is like a really quite unique, because I think, to our knowledge, it's like the only actuator that's created from like a kind of 100% graphene-based material. I think other sort of versions maybe use some kind of binder or some kind of other carrier material, whereas this is just kind of like self-supporting. So as produced, the fractal graphene is working as an actuator, I think, essentially with an electric current. It does creates a dual heating effect, and this kind of heats up the air pockets within the fractal graphene, which allows it to expand. And this is kind of process that can be recovered and then expanded again repeatedly. And so, yeah, this is going to have some applications in potentially some areas like aerospace and so on. But yeah, for something like that, with it being an early stage technology, our best bet, really, at least from my perspective, is looking at a partnership with a company who's already kind of in this space and making these kind of solutions, where we can work with them and see how do we deploy this, where does it fit into their portfolio, and then what would kind of be necessary if we were to co-develop this further to turn it into a kind of market-ready solution.
One more thing I'd like to ask you. Kjirstin has talked about, just last time I talked to her, she talked about 300 and, first of all, I was very embarrassed because I said, did you say 350 tons per month? No, that's annual, Jay. And believe me, that's a lot of graphene. Yeah. And if we're selling hundreds of tons a month, we're doing very, very well, she said. She's also talked about a couple of clients that might need 1,000 tons per year. Maybe they're in the polymers, maybe they're, some of those coatings type of things. I don't know, you would know better. But that's going to take a few years probably. Or, I mean, if we're talking 350 tons next year, by the end of the year, capacity, then it maybe, I think 2030, she said something like that, will be maybe really hitting the road, high speed.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably as a sort of rule of thumb, take it with a sort of pinch of salt though, but typically you can kind of think of an average sort of development cycle maybe taking like 18 months for these kind of projects, and that also I think the caveat there is that assumes that everything kind of goes to plan. You may well come across things where results you don't expect, and you have to kind of go through some iterations, or there might be some fine tuning or optimizing. You could even get like a great result, but maybe the customer wants to see how much can they kind of further cut back the loading levels to get the highest price performance that they can get. And so that, that can
delay,
elongate the timelines. And we're always trying to do thinking about how can we compress the sales cycle, how can we kind of manage that as best as we can to try to keep things on track and try to accelerate stuff as much as possible. But yeah, that's generally the kind of typical time frame with this kind of testing and validation. But then when when you've got a customer that's forecasting thousands of tons a year, we also have to bear in mind that doesn't kind of just happen straight out of the gate. That there will be like a ramp up as well. So
sure.
In the initial phases, they'll be going through sort of pilot scale and then early production and so on, and it will kind of ramp up from there. But those are the accounts that are the goal. I mean, those are the ones that we're focusing our efforts on for sure, because that's really going to be the most impactful for the business.
Well, if I've heard you correctly, Tom, 350 tons per year, you believe there's probably demand in the pipeline, or likely to be demand in the pipeline by the end of 2026. And Kjirstin tells me that if you're doing hundreds of tons a year, you're doing quite well. You're probably very cash flow positive. And then moving forward, something much bigger potentially. And the ability to scale up and the capital cost, which, I mean, I'm involved in the mining industry, and it's just awful. The amount of capital you have to spend and time and everything to get regulation. Well, you have regulation in your business too, but it's not nearly as intense, I think, in many ways as the mining industry. So it seems to me that you're seems to me that things are going very well, and I think that your time spent here will be very valuable to investors, at least those that look a little more deeply into things, to understand the challenges and the what goes into this business, because I think it's very helpful. I don't have anything else right now I can think of, but would you like any parting comments that you'd like to make?
Just thanks again for the opportunity, Jay, and I'm very happy to come back on some other time if there are some more questions you can think of, and I'd be very glad if your viewers and listeners have found this helpful. So yeah, it's been a very incredible journey, very enjoyable so far, and I think there's very, very bright things in the future for HydroGraph.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great place to leave it, Tom. Thank you so much again for your time, and I will like to check in with you again sometime in the future if you're available. All right. That's it, folks, for this week. Next week, I'm not sure exactly. Doug Casey may be a guest. Keep your eye on the inbox for our next podcast. So until then, goodbye and God's blessings to you.